The workday had bled into the artificial glow of my apartment, another 9 hours of parsing financial data that made the world feel, if anything, more predictable. I liked predictable. Predictable was safe. I clicked off the monitor, the sudden darkness a minor jolt. Then I saw it, sitting on the corner of my desk like a forgotten promise, the hard drive. Arthur Blackwood's hard drive. I'd inherited it, sort of. Delivered in a plain brown box, no sender, just my address scrawled on the label. Arthur, my old mentor, a brilliant but eccentric cryptologist who just vanished a couple of months ago. The police chalked him up to another lonely man running off the grid. I thought the same, still thought the same, mostly. Curiosity, a slow-burning thing in my gut, won out over the lingering unease. It wasn't the police who had sent it, I knew that much. Who else would have had it, and why me? I picked it up. Its metal casing felt cool beneath my fingertips, but then, for a split second, a chill, not of temperature, but something deeper, seeped into my palm. A coldness that felt wrong. It passed quick enough, but it left a faint tremor in my chest. Probably just my nerves, I figured. Long day. Too much coffee. I plugged it in. The familiar thump-thump of my computer recognizing new hardware seemed louder than usual. A sense of performance, almost. I opened the encrypted folder. It took me a few hours, a challenge more than anything. I'm good at this stuff. My logical mind finds comfort in patterns, in breaking codes, and this was a damn good one. The files opened, a flood of text documents, audio logs, and a handful of distorted images. Arthur's life, it seemed, distilled into digital chaos. He called it the change. Right, I scoffed, a dry sound in the quiet room. Arthur was always a bit dramatic, even before he started talking about thinning veils and ripples in the fabric. I started reading, skimming through his rambling journal entries. He wrote about a slow decay, a world losing its grip on itself. Sounded like a paranoid rant, the kind you'd expect from a man who'd walled himself off from society. I took a break, stretched, went to the door to grab my keys. I always hung them on the second hook from the left. Always. It was a small ritual, part of my organized life. But this morning, I remembered hanging them there, distinctively. Now they were on the third hook. I stared at them, my brows furrowing. I must have been distracted, I mumbled to myself, a thin, humorless laugh escaping my lips. Must be losing it, just like Arthur. Back at the screen, I dove deeper. There was an old photo among the files, a younger Arthur Blackwood, perhaps in his 20s, eyes bright, looking straight ahead. He was sitting at a desk, a stack of books behind him. As I looked, almost unconsciously, the image on the screen seemed to blink. Not a glitch, not a flicker. A slow, deliberate blink. Arthur's eyes closed, then opened, just a beat slower than my own eyes had blinked. My breath hitched. I leaned closer, narrowing my eyes. Just pixelation, I told myself firmly. Tired eyes. Screens do weird things to your perception after a while. I turned away, rubbing my temples, trying to clear the image from my mind. I kept reading. Arthur's prose grew increasingly erratic, full of obsessive details about how light and shadow were no longer fixed, how they had a will of their own. It made me feel a creeping unease, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The room felt dim, even with my overhead light on. I reached out and switched on the small desk lamp beside me. More light, I thought. More control. But the opposite happened. The shadows seemed to stretch, to elongate, pulling away from the new light source, clinging deeper to the corners of the room.
They felt heavier, almost solid, like blankets absorbing sound, absorbing brightness. I stood up, disturbed, and walked to the window. It was late now, the world outside a smear of streetlights and deep inky black. But then, on the surface of the glass, a faint distortion. Not a reflection, not a smudge. A strange, geometric curve, unlike anything I'd ever seen, seemed to press itself against the pane. A brief, impossible line before it vanished. My heart hammered. I quickly stepped back, shaking my head. No, that's not real. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, trying to grasp onto something solid. I turned away, rubbing my temples, trying to clear the image from my mind. I kept reading. Arthur's prose grew increasingly erratic, full of obsessive details about how light and shadow were no longer fixed, how they had a will of their own. It made me feel a creeping unease, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. The room felt dim, even with my overhead light on. I reached out and switched on the small desk lamp beside me. More light, I thought, more control. But the opposite happened. The shadows seemed to stretch, to elongate, pulling away from the new light source, clinging deeper to the corners of the room. They felt heavier, almost solid, like blankets absorbing sound, absorbing brightness. I stood up, disturbed, and walked to the window. It was late now, the world outside a smear of streetlights and deep inky black. But then, on the surface of the glass, a faint distortion. Not a reflection, not a smudge. A strange, geometric curve, unlike anything I'd ever seen, seemed to press itself against the pane. A brief, impossible line before it vanished. My heart hammered. I quickly stepped back, shaking my head. No, that's not real. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again, trying to grasp onto something solid.
A whisper, faint but chilling, like wind sighing through brittle bones, seemed to curl around the edges of my hearing. It brushed against my thoughts, whispering, laughing almost. It wasn't a language, not really, just sound. A sound that seemed to mock my denial. I needed a distraction, something normal. I grabbed my phone, aimlessly scrolling through news feeds. I found an article about a woman who'd simply vanished from her home, leaving everything behind. I vaguely remembered seeing it yesterday. I scrolled past it, then scrolled back up. Something felt off. The like button, usually a vibrant blue, now displayed a peculiar, faded gray-brown, like old, dry blood, or something that had been exposed to the elements for decades. I tapped it. Nothing. No reaction. The button just sat there, inert, muted. It wasn't just broken, I realized. The concept of liking that news, or anything in the world really, it felt like it had been scraped away, worn down to something lifeless. A profound nausea welled up in me. I stumbled over to the kitchen, gulping down water, but the taste in my mouth was metallic and stale, like rust. I leaned against the counter, breathing hard. I needed to get my head straight. I told myself it was stress, that the hard drive was messing with my mind, playing tricks. Arthur's madness, infectious. But then, an image flickered in my mind, one from the hard drive. An old family photo of Arthur. He was young, beaming. I remembered reading a detail in one of his early journal entries, before things got weird. He mentioned a navy blue jacket with a distinctive X-shaped tear that his mother painstakingly patched. He wrote about that jacket a lot. But in the photo I'd seen, Arthur was wearing a faded, ash-gray coat. And the tear wasn't an X, it was a jagged, angry zigzag. My stomach churned. And then a phantom smell, sharp and clean, yet utterly repulsive. Chlorine. It clung to the air, making my eyes water. An unbearable dampness seemed to seep from the image in my mind, an impossible moisture that soaked into my thoughts. It wasn't just Arthur's memory that was changing. It was like the hard drive, this legacy, was retroactively editing its own past. And if it could do that, could it change mine? Could it change ours? The thought was a physical blow. I hadn't slept for what felt like days, only dozing in brief, troubled bursts, each filled with fragmented images and the unsettling, quiet laughter that wasn't quite there. I'd been poring over Arthur's later entries, the truly incomprehensible ones. He talked about mirrors being two-way doors. He wrote things like, "The reflection isn't just you. It's a possibility, and sometimes those possibilities decide to explore." I found myself in my bathroom, the fluorescent light buzzing with an unnerving intensity. My reflection stared back, eyes wide, dark circles beneath them. Mad eyes. My own eyes. I didn't want to do it, but Arthur's words, they had burrowed deep. "If the mirror is a door," he wrote, "it can open from both sides, but not always in the way you want." My hand, trembling slightly, reached out. It touched the cold, hard glass. I closed my eyes, taking a shuddering breath. I told myself it was just glass, just a surface, just a reflection. When I opened them, for a raw, impossible second, my reflection had its back turned to me. Its shoulders were slumped, head bowed slightly. Then, as quickly as it had turned away, it swiveled back up, facing me again. But it wasn't quite right. The posture was a fraction off. The angle of its head, the way its mouth seemed to be set, just barely a smirk. My heart leaped into my throat. I lifted my hand again, hesitantly. My fingers pressed against the glass. Only it wasn't glass. Not quite. My fingers seemed to slide. Not a smooth glide, but a strange, viscous movement, like pushing through a thin membrane of lukewarm oil. I yanked my hand back, a strangled gasp escaping my lips. And then I saw it. On the surface of the mirror, where my fingers had been, a single, perfectly clear droplet of water formed. It thickened, then detached, softly splattering into the pristine white sink below. It wasn't from the faucet. It wasn't on my hand, which felt completely dry. It just appeared. From the mirror. As I stared, transfixed, at the tiny droplet, it shimmered, not evaporating, but dissipating, like it was being absorbed by the porcelain.
Or like the very essence of the water was being leached away, leaving nothing. I stumbled back, hitting the wall with a dull thud. My heart was a frantic drum solo against my ribs. It beat so hard I was lightheaded, dizzy. The buzzing of the light above seemed to amplify, filling my skull. There was no denying it. What was happening was real. The world, the reality I knew, it wasn't just playing tricks, it was being manipulated. With me. It was aimed at me. I somehow found my way back to my desk, my limbs feeling heavy, alien. My eyes were glued to the monitor. Arthur's chaotic notes, his warnings, still scrolled. I found the section he dedicated to his legacy. I'd read it a dozen times, dismissed it as a final, desperate plea for attention from a broken mind. But now?
As I watched, mesmerized, a new line of code, a string of symbols utterly foreign, started to materialize beneath Arthur's last frantic entry. It wasn't typing itself, not really. More like it was always there, only now becoming visible. And then, slowly, unmistakably, a single letter formed, stark and clear amidst the alien script. The letter E. And next to it, a blank space. A space as though waiting for a name. For my name? The letter E. Just sitting there, blinking, waiting for the rest, I suppose. For Ethan. It was a punch to the gut, but not a sharp one, more like a heavy, dull blow. A recognition. Like my name was being called by something I knew, but had forgotten I knew. I felt it, then pushed it away. Just a coincidence, a glitch, Arthur's final twisted joke. Yeah, a joke. But the jokes weren't funny anymore. Not after the mirror, not after the water. My hands, they still felt that strange, viscous slide sometimes, even when I was just gripping a pen. It hadn't left me. No, it had settled in, a cold, oily film beneath my skin. I hadn't slept much. The apartment became my world, a shrinking, tightening world. I couldn't bring myself to go out anymore, not with those things happening. Work? Forget it. Emails piled up, calls went unanswered. My boss, a perfectly understandable annoyance, leaving increasingly frustrated messages. I just let them ring, let them pile up. They couldn't understand. How could they? Instead, I spent my days poring over Arthur's files, the change, his legacy. I was becoming him, I know, or trying to outrun it, to prepare. My apartment was shifting, slowly. I saw it. The walls didn't quite meet in the corners anymore, not if you looked long enough. The floorboards creaked, but not from weight alone. It was like they were stretching, breathing. I needed supplies, food, water, a filtration system, a generator. Arthur's notes had full schematics for a compact, self-sufficient shelter, all from mundane things. I typed up a list on my tablet, fingers flying. Canned goods, water purification tablets, flashlight. That was the third one, flashlight. I glanced down, making sure I'd got it right. But it said, flash, an empty square where light should have been. My brain stalled. Flash. Then that symbol. Just blank. I blinked, looked again. Still there. I backspaced, tried to type light. L, I, G, H, T. Each letter appeared, then vanished, replaced by the empty square. Flash, empty square, empty square, empty square. I tried again, frantically. L, I, G, H, T. No. Flash, empty square, empty square, empty square. It was like the word itself had been deleted from the language, from the concept. What the hell? I muttered, my voice thin. I slammed my hand down on the table, a dull thud. This was just a font error. Yeah, a system error. It had to be. I took a deep, shuddering breath. A dry laugh escaped me. Just a font error. My voice sounded so weak, so hopeful. And yet, another thought, colder, more precise, snaked through my mind. Or a new rule being written? I grabbed my phone, fingers shaking a little. I had to talk to someone. Mark, my old friend Mark. He was grounded, normal. Maybe he could talk some sense into me, or confirm I was losing my mind. Either would be a relief. I started a video call. It rang. Once. Twice.
Then Mark's face filled the screen. He smiled. "Ethan, man, it's been a while. Long time no here, dude. You okay?" He looked normal, perfectly normal. His apartment background, his slightly rumpled shirt. I started to explain, my words stumbling over themselves, trying to describe the hard drive, Arthur, the oddities. He just listened, his head cocked a little, still smiling. That smile.
It was off. Every time he broke into a grin, the movement of his lips, the crinkle around his eyes, it was a fraction of a second after I heard the sound of his laugh. Like a badly dubbed movie, a terrible, unsettling lag. His eyes, too. Sometimes they would just fix on me, unblinking, for too long. And then they would flicker, blinking fast, a rapid-fire succession, as if trying to catch up on all the missed blinks. He still said all the right things, the friendly words. "Man, you sound stressed. You need to get out more. Take a break." But the words felt hollow, like they were just sounds, not connected to the face, not connected to Mark. When he finally said, "All right, I gotta run. We'll catch up soon, okay?" and disconnected, I just sat there. The screen went black, but I could still feel it. That warmth, that faint pressure on my ears, not from the phone speaker, but like the echoes of his laugh. A strange, residual sensation that just wouldn't go away. I tried to rub it off, but it clung, like a film. I put the phone down, my chest heaving. Was that really Mark? Or was it something else? A performance? Every word, every slight delay, was it designed to make me question everything? To make me question him? I paced my small living room, the space I'd meticulously organized, now feeling like a trap. The air was thick, heavy. I turned on the TV, desperate for anything normal, anything that would confirm the world was still sane. A local news channel. A familiar anchor was reporting on what they called unusual weather events in a nearby town. Localized atmospheric disturbances, she said, her voice calm, professional. Minor structural damage reported due to unexpected micro-tornadoes. But the words, they didn't match what I could almost hear. Not with my ears, but somewhere deeper. A low, persistent murmur inside my head. It was growing louder. They don't see. They don't see. The words repeated themselves, a frantic, desperate chorus. And then, the anchor. She stopped, mid-sentence. Her head slowly, smoothly turned directly towards the camera. Her eyes, they were wide, vacant, not looking at the camera, but through it. Her mouth didn't move, but a voice, flat and synthetic, emotionless, came from the TV speakers. Not hers, not really. Truth is a choice. Lies are a comfort. Choose what lightens you. I froze. A prickle of ice ran down my spine. My hand flew to the remote, slamming the power button. The screen went black, the silence that followed even heavier than the room had been before. My breathing was ragged. This was it. This was no longer just the hard drive. That thing, the thing Arthur wrote about, it was here. It was talking to me, through them, through everything. It knew what I was thinking. It knew I doubted. I wanted to turn on every single light in the apartment, to flood the space with brightness, to push back the encroaching shadows, to make it clear, to make it safe. I fumbled for the light switches. Overhead? A lamp? No. It didn't just stay the same. The room grew darker. The shadows, they deepened. They clung to the corners, to the furniture, like velvet curtains. They weren't just the absence of light. They were
a presence, a crushing weight. It wasn't just my sanity fraying. It was the world, this apartment. It was breaking down. Or rather, it was being rewritten. Each day, a detail. Small things at first. The digital clock on my microwave yesterday had read 3472. I'd stared at it for a long, bewildered minute, then decided it was just a malfunction. Today, it was the water. I needed a drink. I turned the tap in the kitchen, letting the water run into a glass. But it wasn't clear. It wasn't even cloudy. It was a deep, inky black, thick, like crude oil, only without the smell. It didn't smell of anything. It just was. I pulled the glass away, my hand trembling. What the hell? I tried to pour it down the sink, but it refused. It clung to the glass, an impossible viscous sludge sticking to the ceramic like tar. Like it had become part of the glass, or the glass part of it. A dark, shifting mass that almost seemed to pulse faintly. It wasn't water, not anymore. It was something else, something new. It hit me then, a cold, hard certainty. It wasn't the world that was sick, not out there. It was here, inside. I was being rewritten, piece by piece. The rules, my rules, the rules of living, they were changing.
This apartment wasn't just decaying around me. It was being rebuilt, recreated. And I was part of the material, a part of the project, a part of the change. I found my notebook on the table, the one where I'd started to jot down Arthur's more coherent entries, my own observations about the occurrences. But it wasn't just my neat analytical script anymore. The pages were filled, grotesque drawings, spirals that seemed to pull inward, impossible geometric shapes that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. I didn't remember drawing them, but the lines were my own, etched deep into the paper. One page, a disturbing illustration, an endless loop. A blurred figure, almost like Arthur, handing a hard drive to another figure. Their face was indistinct, but I could feel it. Feel me in that face. And then, scrawled beneath it, in a hand that was definitely mine, but somehow ancient, worn. The biggest surprise is, I was always Arthur. My mind, it snapped. Everything that had held it together, all the logic, all the denial, all the fragile threads, they ripped. I was Arthur. He was me. Was this a memory? A premonition? Was I just repeating what he'd lived? Had he drawn this? Had I drawn this? I couldn't tell. My own identity fractured, dissolved. The question wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about whether I had ever actually been Ethan. Was Ethan just a temporary mask, a placeholder in an endless, horrifying cycle? I pulled myself away from the notebook, my body heavy, alien. The apartment was my bunker, my coffin. I was in the small, makeshift shelter I'd created from Arthur's plans, a tiny room within a room, bolted shut, walls reinforced with scavenged metal sheets. It had been days, or weeks. I couldn't tell. Time had lost its meaning. The sounds from outside the steel door had faded, becoming indistinct murmurs. The distortions of reality beyond this room were echoes, groans of strained matter. I was fixing the door again, always fixing, always sealing. Any tiny gap, any hairline crack, I frantically sealed it with my portable welding machine.
Sparks flew, bright against the dim light, momentarily searing my tired eyes. I felt the heat of the torch, powerful, intense. But the steel door, it remained cool to the touch. No, the warmth radiated from the cold concrete walls behind me. I almost dropped the torch. It was backwards. The heat was in the wrong place, moving, shifting. Suddenly, the single electric bulb that illuminated my sanctuary flickered, then died. Darkness. Complete, suffocating darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, deafening drum. Thump, thump, thump. I fumbled, hands scrambling across the rough concrete floor, searching for my flashlight. Where was it? It was always right here. My fingers closed around it. I pressed the button. A faint, weak beam finally pierced the gloom. But it didn't push back the dark. It did the opposite. The light, my feeble light, seemed to be sucked into the walls, drawn inward. The darkness around me, around the light, deepened. It became heavier, thicker, like it had substance. My hand, still clutching the light, moved, almost on its own, toward the concrete wall beside me. A small crack. I'd patched it yesterday, or maybe the day before. Now it was back, bigger, like a thin, jagged line drawn by a restless hand. My finger brushed against it, hesitatively. And the crack, it widened, just slightly, like a mouth, slowly, lazily opening. A smell, from inside the crack, sweet, sickly sweet, like rotting flowers or stale, overripe fruit, but with a deeper, visceral undertone of decay. It filled my nose, my lungs, my stomach lurched. I gagged, stumbling back, hitting the opposite wall. And then, the whispers. They weren't in my head anymore, not just my thoughts. They came from the crack, from the wall itself. A low, sibilant murmur, like 1,000 dry leaves rustling in a dead wind. They whispered my name. Ethan. Join us. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the floor, the flashlight clattering away into the dark. My mind, it was gone. The madness hadn't just seeped in, it had taken over. I wasn't fighting reality anymore. I was the distortion. My head swam, my hand trembled. I found a piece of charcoal on the concrete. I'd kept it for sketching ideas, for when I was still myself. I raised it to the cold, metal-covered wall of my shelter, and I started to draw grotesque images.
Impossible spirals that twisted back on themselves. Shapes that defied every law of physics. A circle, without a beginning, without an end. Weeks, months, years, it's hard to tell. Time doesn't seem to work the way it used to. The apartment, it's transformed, not destroyed, not really, just different. The walls breathe now. They pulse with a faint internal light, like veins under thin skin. On the floor, scattered like fallen leaves, are the papers. Thousands of them, printed out. Diagrams no human mind could comprehend. Blueprints for impossible machines that could twist space. Stories written in 100 different hands, none of them making sense, all interwoven. And a recurring annotation, scrawled over and over in every available margin, like an echo that refuses to die. The door is open. Can you hear it? On the main wall, my final canvas, where I drew. There's a much larger, more intricate drawing now. A faceless figure. standing in the middle of a swirling, dark abyss. The figure's form seems to shift, to ripple at the edges of your vision, and in its hand, held out to no one, to everyone, is a hard drive. Familiar, horribly familiar. And beneath it, scrawled in a shaky but somehow terribly clear hand, the last words. My last words. Find me. Decrypt me. I am waiting for